recording.
Yes, I put them by they're by the sugar, so. I put together some handouts and we'll say hi to everyone too.
And grab coffee, donuts. I have tea if you want tea instead.
Okay,
Did you get one? You got one?
I printed mine.
Did you get one?
okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You're welcome.
Good morning. Good morning. So that's the
Morning.
other reason why I picked this spot, blocking the cameras the whole time. All right, so Ryan, can you hear us okay?
I can. Can you hear me?
Okay, perfect. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Great.
So thank you everyone for coming together. I think this is a super important issue that came to our attention with some of the businesses that we work with as we go out and looking at different projects that they're working on. And especially in our area, some real specific areas in the skilled trades. And for us here, that involves a lot of our forest industry as well on all different levels, from actual forestry, logging, all the way up through manufacturing, and then also with the building trades and things like that. So we kind of just reached out to a nice variety of folks. So I think everybody pretty much knows each other. No? Okay, well, let's go around and say hello to everyone. I'm Maeve, CEDC. I'm the outreach coordinator. This is
Hey, good morning. I'm Jimmy Henson. I'm with the Office of Workforce Opportunities. I'm the Workforce Development Administrator, as well as the State of New Hampshire Dislocated Worker Unit Administrator. Fancy way of saying I handle layoffs and closure.
Mark Fallbeck, HR Director for Fact Solution.
Abby Corrard, staff recruiter for the Mountain View Grant.
Yep, Declan Higgins, and General Manager of Northwoods Manufacturing.
My name is Michael Kopp. I'm a partner at North Country Ford next door. I also serve on the board of the New Hampshire Automotive Education Foundation, which is one of my side gigs. And we're tasked with workforce development, specifically in the auto industry.
And I'm Erica Canal, I'm the Executive Director of CDC. And I just actually want to say Declan is actually the one that started this. So I want to thank Declan. Thanks, Declan.
I'm Rob Scott. I'm the Assistant Superintendent for the White Mountains Regional School District. I oversee a lot of career and technical ed programming, which I've partnered several people at the table to give kids their businesses.
And I'm Michelle Gross. I work at White Mountains Regional High School as ELO coordinator and have a great support system with our community and students.
I'm Ray Berthium. I'm County Forester with UNH Cooperative Extension for here.
I'm Liz Archeri, and I'm with the Apprenticeship New Hampshire team, and we work to develop pre-apprenticeships and registered apprenticeships throughout the state. I'm Crystal Shallow. I'm the business manager at the Garland Mill.
And I'm Ben Southworth. I'm the owner. Yeah.
very good.
And me, I'm Ryan. I am the operations manager at the Weathervane Theater.
Great. Thank you all. I think I put together just like a few slides. In talking with everybody kind of individually, I went through and kind of, highlighted some of the regulations that we seem to be having the most immediate issues with, or that come up the most often through there. And like I said, this started out and kind of.
Do you mind if I say something real quick?
Yeah.
Because I want you to know where I'm coming from with this. First, I like to seek to understand what's going on in the workforce. We have too many openings that we can possibly fill with the current workforce that we do have. Everybody knows that. And as the Workforce Development Administrator, I'm constantly being asked, how can we fill these roles? I'm looking at every possibility. And when I start learning about a group of able-bodied people that aren't able to perform duties and responsibilities, it looks like a viable option. I don't want to set expectations to the point where some of these are set in federal guidelines. So that means we're going to have to get other people involved. Some of this stuff will not be able to change overnight, but I think it needs to be addressed. It's time for it to be readdressed again. The other thing is my first step was going to be to look at anywhere there's possible misunderstandings. It has come up where businesses says, we can't do this, or somebody local has said that they haven't done this when they come through to do an inspection, only to find out that that person was wrong. I want to be able to work with Department of Labor and possibly OSHA to figure out, first of all, where's the starting point? And then the second thing, I want to be able to learn what is stopping what I would be calling a reasonable expectation for a person to be doing this in their own home. If it's a reasonable expectation that they could be doing this in their own home, then there's no reason why they can't be doing it in a profession. And I want to be able to look and see if we can create an argument around. I'm definitely not looking to point the fingers backwards toward people who made these decisions, but just to clarify that we are moving forward and gathering the data to turn around and say, maybe it's time we rethink this and come up with a new approach. Because I really believe that maybe back in the 50s, we had people doing things that were dangerous that got people hurt, both kids and adults. I think OSHA and DOL and businesses who care about their employees have figured out a way to make their employees safe. So if that's the case, then let's put safeguards around these procedures so that we can figure out how to get more people doing these and lift the restrictions. I think, you know, we tell our kids from the day they're born, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this. And all of a sudden we have a skills and abilities in front of them. And then we say, oh, you can't do that. The first thing they ask is why. And so I want us to ask why with every question that we come for. That's where I'm coming from, but I have no disillusion that this is going to be easy. And everybody's just going to shake their heads and say, hey, this sounds like a great idea. Let's just do it. There's not enough Generation Xers in place yet. And that's the way my generation is. We figure out why the hell not. Let's just give it a try and see what happens. If nobody's bleeding in 20 minutes, we keep doing it. So.
Excellent. Yeah. Thanks for that, Jimmy. That really helps us all kind of see where we're at with
Yeah,
it.
because I'm going to be coming
Yeah.
back to you from time to time to get real examples and stuff. I want to smack some of these situations right between somebody's eyes and say, okay, what's the reasonable expectation here? You know, I heard the other day you can't climb a step stool. Well, what if you're only 5 foot tall? If you're 5 foot tall, you do it every day at home. I mean, I've seen my niece who's 6 years old who climb up on the counter, climb down the outside of the steps. I mean, we're going to take all the swing sets away with little bars on it. I mean, come on, we got to figure this out.
Right.
And I'll shut up now.
No, that's excellent. No, it's great to hear, your thinking on it too, as that way we know.
And I'll apologize ahead of time. I am a retired Coast Guard chief. Profanities and some stray thoughts that should probably stay. Will seep out from time to time. So
I think you're in okay company. Yeah. Yeah. So, I'm just gonna put it up so we can all look together, but the handouts that I did, again, they're just yes. They're just a reference. That way we kind of knew what we're going for. And I really want you guys to, type in and share your experiences with each thing. So I did these. I'm kind of new with this. This one. Oh, I know. I do it funny every time. Sorry. I'll get to it. That's that one.
Did you open it yet?
I did.
Okay.
It's there. It's just over here and
There
then
you go.
it's here. We're getting there. I promise. So we've got all the businesses. Just for the first kind of examples that I saw that you guys have mentioned. And these are like kind of quotes from how it's written. But these specifically come up with the in the wood industry, which is, and we're talking about specifically, I've noticed there's difference in the ages too. in all honesty, some of these particulars came up for me. I have a son who's 14 and my husband, works in log home building and maintenance for a business. He's worked there for 30 years. And so they wanted to hire, my son, and it first came up with some of these. And because he's only 14. And I was like, well, it kind of makes sense. He's only 14, but then you start to see that it goes on from there too, like even at the older ages. So these things like power driven, woodworking machinery, this is how Declan also, came to us. I don't believe it was in the 14 to 15-year-old range, the older ones. But you know, running woodworking machines, hoisting apparatus with, Mike, you must run into this with in the auto mechanics. Also, I was speaking with, Margaret Callahan from Omni, and she has a lot of experience. She was a former principal at a CTE center, in Exeter, and for healthcare industries. Like I didn't even think about it. Hoist when they have lifts, Hoya lifts that they use in healthcare. So these kids are going through these CTE programs.
Hospitality and
Yeah.
and being able to operate a lift to get somebody with a disability in and out.
Right, of the
a
pool.
I would imagine in theater as well, when you want to be able to lift something to stand something up or to host some person in the
Yep.
air safely.
Yep.
You would imagine there's a lot of different things.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And,
exactly.
You know. So, any specifics you guys like?
And there is a
on those?
distinction between 14 and 16, right? It's kind
Yes.
of like no, and then okay, maybe when you get to 17
For some things.
or
I
something.
did, and I actually printed them all out. Here, there is, I printed out like certain here's a whole bunch of them. I printed them all out too, to take a look at. And these are the regulations and kind of, those are specifically the items they cannot do.
Okay.
Yeah, and from 14 to 15 and then 16 up, there are differences with everything from hours to, but most of the equipment is right through. From what I've been able to see, the power driven equipment, and the hoist, those things go right up through till they're 18.
Yeah.
So,
So the crazy thing for me is this. Our kids would probably learn how to operate this machinery safer in that industry setting. You know, we have a teacher that's like kind of a jack of all trades. We run a sawmill. We're running, you know, quasi lifts. We are touching some of the most dangerous tools in the industry. And he's a novice trying to teach kids. You know, so it's just crazy that we're allowed to do it as a school with a guy who's not even
Right.
certified.
right,
But I can't put, you know, I can't put a kid that's 17 that's really interested in the softball
Right.
industry down.
Yeah.
yeah,
You know,
And do we still have shop in high school?
yeah.
Okay.
When you did have the wood shop, that equipment is way more dangerous than the equipment we run.
yeah,
And we can do it at school all day long.
Yeah.
But when you want to come work for us, you're not even allowed to go near it.
right.
So
We have the
Mhm.
same issue at the factory where every job we have outside the office involves either lifts or, you know, running equipment. So
Right.
You know, I've had kids come back that worked in North Country Ford and called Dana out on, hey, that guard isn't proper,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
So we gotta get that fixed. Nobody should use that grinding,
Right.
you know? So it's just, that's where I get frustrated, you know? I'm allowed to do virtually anything I want as long as I can tie it to competencies. As long as we're not negligent, you know, we're covered.
Right.
But we can't send them to the experts that have way safer equipment than us, more expertise in how to properly operate it.
I still remember 14 watching the Ripsaw safety video in high school.
Yeah.
You know, watching some guy, it was all fake, but you know, getting a piece of wood shoved to his throat because they didn't have something.
How many
Yeah.
times I walk into my shop and I'm like, hey, put the guard on that grinder, please.
Yeah.
And then I show them a TikTok video.
Of what happened.
Grinding wheel.
Yeah, I think that's a question worth asking is if you can do it at school in a learning environment, why can't you do it at a business in a learning environment as well? We have so many different programs, not only at the Employment Securities Office, but vocational rehabilitation, TANF program, our program that deals with on-the-job training. and you're basically taking a skilled worker next to an unskilled worker and you're training them. And it is spelled out, like in an apprenticeship, step by step, what the person has to do, how they do it. If it makes them feel better to create a training safety program around it, which I think OSHA would probably drool at that, then let them do it. Let them create a series of videos.
And we bring OSHA in every year. All our kids that walk through that shop, the 10-hour OSHA certification. But I just don't know why that can't translate into, you know, a 17-year-old with an OSHA certification, why it's so difficult.
Right, for them to then take that out of the school to an actual job site.
Yeah.
So like, it's come up with talking to you guys. So they get these certifications in these CTE programs, they go through all of this training. And then in, say, the summer, they cannot go get a job where they're doing that same work that they've been certified through the programs. So then these kids are ending up taking some other job, possibly losing interest in what they like got into all year long, might be showing incredible skill for, but especially in an environment like ours, you have either those skilled trades or something possibly completely different, or they drive an hour to go to work to get something that's sort of what they want. So it's causing it like kind of an out migration of the youth afterwards too, because then they, oh, well, if I start working at Starbucks this summer, the next summer I can work there and I'll get a bonus or I'll get a, you know, so it's taking them out of that pursuit. They go back to school and they're like, oh, well, you know. And I think Margaret brought up an interesting point when I spoke with her too, about the length of the CTE program funding. And that she has seen that can be an issue too, because it's only for so long in the schools, that the program is kind of 2 years.
Yeah.
And then if they're beyond, they do that 2 years of training, it's not covered for them to continue their senior year. And so then you've got a kid that was right into it, totally getting trained, getting, you know, the skills, and then has to go that last year and not do it again. And then, you know, like kind of get off his game sort of with the industry. And that's seems to be.
So I have a question around that, if I may. So do you have, the majority of your CTE students entering as juniors, or do you have some as sophomores?
So it depends on the program interest. So in culinary, it is so popular and I'm only limited to 32 seats that we tend to push them off until their junior year. Every once in a while, a kid who did the middle school introductory career exploration in it, and then an introductory high school class in it, that is really passionate, dead set in the industry, will let in as a sophomore. And then their year 3 becomes interesting because we do not get reimbursement from the CTE funding from the city. The law says we don't get reimbursement. We still put in for it. We still get it from time to time because there's no oversight of it. You know, the DOE is so understaffed that.
So when we have a training
thank you.
program and we have like there has to be some type of end goal of once at the end of the training, it's either credential or some type of educational attainment, right?
Yeah.
So those are a level, I would imagine, within culinary of stackable things that they learn.
Yeah.
So if we have such a thing as stackable credentials, which we constantly push, why can't we have stackable training credentials?
Yeah.
That also talk about these safety things that we could potentially.
Well, and the other piece is the reauthorization of Perkins. Our state plan, that one of the number one evaluators for CTE centers is work-based learning.
Yeah.
So you can either do a simulated one or it has to be authentic, you know, get them into apprentice programs or internships. They can't be job shadows. And how do you do that in a welding shop? You know, how can you simulate? There's not enough people dropping stuff off to our welding shop. You know, they don't want high school kids.
And the only virtual welder machine that I know is at Portsmouth Maple Shipyard.
Yeah.
They're trying to get one in Manchester at Granite State Manufacturing, but you're talking huge bucks for something like that.
Right.
I mean, a lot of money. But I think that, you know, if Because I'm thinking about language that people are used to in this environment, and the stackable credential is something that really does come out.
Yeah.
If it's related to safety and using something so that someone's safe, then why can't we create a whole list of training criteria or training credentials and make those stackable within the industry? Because as industry leaders, you could turn around and say that if somebody gets into this industry, here are the things I need them to use. And unfortunately, you go back into the 60s and 70s when I was born, I've got 58 years of experience to tell you how you can get hurt with any particular industry. In service, we had these things called mishap reports. Anytime something negative happened, you had to send it out so everybody could benefit from learning from that. And anytime that there's an accident, if I'm not mistaken, business owners could tell me if there is an injury on site, there has to be a report filed somewhere.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, we can learn from those things and we can continue to improve it so that if this one training was not followed, then it's operator error. It was a lack of training, and then unfortunately somebody could come in and find fault. Where in this case, if it was missing, then it could be added and readdressed instead of, I think the real big issue that we're dealing with is at some point somebody said somebody got hurt, stop. And instead of dealing with it and trying to cut down into it so that it benefited the entire industry, they just said stop. And then it became, we can't do this.
Yeah, I think like you had said earlier, the 50s and 60s, early 70s, it was a different world. They're seeing kids get mangled and they're like, okay, we can't have this. You can't have these kids working in these environments, but it's a different environment.
Well, I got saws that I can put my hand next to that'll stop.
Exactly.
I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot of things in place, and I think that maybe that could be driven by an owner's point of view. So that if they said, okay, here's a list of equipment that you could purchase that has the safety guards in place. And if you're going to spend the money, it's like buying a desk. If I can buy one, it's going to be $100. But if I can buy one for 105, that's movable up and down, and I can adjust it for my worker, why not? If I'm going to spend the money, I'm going to spend it on something I can use and not limit my workforce, but expand it.
And can
Right.
that somehow be used for the employer's benefit to kind of like certify to the state my equipment is there anything in place that says if you're running equipment up to these standards, can that help open that door to the employees coming in because you have this, like safety or safer equipment that you're operating that can somehow leverage the the regulation. I don't know, but it seems like if the employers seem to be willing to, obviously they want to keep their employees safe all the way. Like, can that play into somehow opening the door to
Right.
the youth being able to use that equipment if it is certain standard? Does that happen anywhere else? Like,
So
is it
I would make that more like a safety, a stackable safety credential within the industry.
Yeah. And that would be more on
Yeah.
my solution. That's why I went to green. I was like, okay, yeah, that's kind of more of a, yeah,
And I still think that the word reasonable expectation
yeah.
is a good approach to most of this. If it's a reasonable expectation that a person could potentially even use this at home. And I want to exclude, in some cases, city kids, because it just seems like but I grew up in a rural setting. I was driving tractors, I was driving mowers, I was operating chainsaws, and I was doing all this stuff. And the last thing, my dad would do, he wouldn't give me the chainsaw and say, go for it, kid, I'll tell you what you did wrong. He went over everything with me, because the last thing you want is to see your child get hurt. And the last thing we want as business owners is to see one of our employees get hurt. And the last thing we want to do, especially with a kid in training or in an apprenticeship program, is see them get hurt, because the minute that happens, the expectation in the field is stop, reevaluate, and figure out what we're doing. And we don't want to stop. We've done enough stopping with COVID.
So I just moved to, oh yeah, go ahead, Ryan.
Sorry. I agree with all of this stuff. I think the thing that trips me up the most, and maybe it's just because of my experience at the theater, is that there's an age limit. Like like a 14-year-old can come in with 7 years of experience using a saw and not be able to do it in the weather at the weather vane because they're 16 or whatever. But like a 40-year-old could come in with no training at all and there's no like regulations around it.
Mhm.
Right.
Like last year,
Everybody's nodding at that, yeah.
right? And last year we had this 16-year-old who turned 17 in the season, but that still doesn't mean anything, in this regard. But he had been working in a shop for his whole life. He literally is a carpenter, and that's what he was hired on through an apprentice program with this organization in Florida. And he is probably one of the most skilled carpenters we've actually ever hired, but we couldn't let him do, 50% of his job because he was too young. But 3 years ago, we had like this 25-year-old person who I don't think has ever seen a hammer before. And so, the age thing is what really throws me off because, there isn't really an age limit to skills like this. Obviously, I wouldn't give like a saw to a 6-year-old who maybe like doesn't have the dexterity and all that stuff. But, there has to be a point where somebody has the experience and the training, like you're all saying, where age shouldn't really play into that.
Excellent, yeah.
And I think it comes back to what Jimmy was saying about stackable credentials. If
Right.
somewhere there could be a footnote in each industry, if you have obtained this credential,
Then you can.
then you
Right.
can. And on top of that, like, I know one of the other barriers is the liability, right? But schools have work-based learning waivers. So Primex, when we place kids anywhere, I send them a certificate, letting them know that they are covered under our insurance as long as it's not gross negligence, right? But that stackability, because we have kids that in our ag program, they can do OSHA 10. They can do the Ag for You tractor safety through Ohio State. They do chainsaw safety. And it goes to I forget her name from the weather vane. But the companies can then hire someone who's never
Has
pulled the
no
string on
skill.
a chainsaw.
Exactly.
And say, here you go, start cutting.
Right.
No.
Yeah,
And the
Right.
weird thing is, a buddy reminded me of, is that during times of war, all these regulations get waived.
Yeah.
For the workforce.
Yeah.
So do we really want could we get out in front of it and do this safely and train people? So God forbid, if we ever do go to war, we're already trained safely on how to do it and not throwing people in the middle of an already hectic and chaotic process.
right.
Let's think about it beforehand so that we can do it safely. And I think too, within the apprenticeship programs, you could then take age into account, like with the pre-apprenticeship programs. Hell, we could even go back all the way into middle school and do pre-apprentice where there's, like, you take somebody that's, one kid was looking at wanting to become a master plumber. And the first job that he had was outfitting the truck. And he got so sick of outfitting the truck. He goes, well, I know that's a that, and that's a that. And he started naming everything. And they said, okay, what do you use for this job? Well, use that, that, and that. Well, if it's in the truck, can I use it? Well, no, it's not in the truck. Is that cost me money? Well, yeah, it cost me money. So the kid finally realized, hey, I'm learning how to set up my own truck, which is the first step to become a master plumber. And
Right.
these things are credentials or training that we think of. And as we start to identify gaps within the industry, we can redefine that training.
And I do think that there are some waivers if you
Yeah.
have a registered apprenticeship program for various age groups being able to do types of activities that are normally prohibited. So we kind of sit down with the employer and look at the occupation, look at the on-the-job training, take a look at the state regs and say, okay, where are these waivers going to come into play? Many times a pre-apprenticeship is really just learning the safety about the company. They're spending some time with a company doing non-hazardous things, but important things, learning about the culture, the safety, and the opportunities within that company. So
Yeah.
yes, I agree with you that apprenticeship piece can be helpful in maybe identifying some waivers.
And I think that might be the way in initially, because one of the nice things with apprenticeships is that they're trackable. Everything with CTE training, they're trackable, as far as if they end up moving into an industry. And you can start to show even to our insurance counterparts, yes, we back this type of training with this type of industry-led task, and we have shown zero or very low number of accidents. You know, and I think that's, I mean, that's how you do it. The more, it's weird because the more examples that we have of something coming down to a very minuscule payout, the cheaper the insurance gets. But when they start to limit the pool of where it's being done, and then you put the ratio in there of people doing it, of course, the numbers are going to be higher. If I have one incident in 2 million, it's different than one incident in 100. So you have to be able to overwhelm them nationwide with this kind of stuff.
And so I was thinking what you were just saying, education. I probably have more Department of Labor claims than everybody at this table combined in the past month, and you guys had in the past 2 years, you know? So they need to like use some common sense and look at actual statistics. Like,
Yeah.
education is more likely to get hurt or killed. And I don't want to sound grim than working in
Right.
an auto shop or, you know, a manufacturing facility or at a sawmill.
Right.
Well, I'm just thinking back to my military training, you know, when you take an 18 to 20-year-old kid, you put them in charge of a 48-foot motor lifeboat, you're taking them out on the coast of Oregon, and you're putting them through some of the roughest seas in the world. We've had people die doing that stuff. People learn the hard way. When you pull out, yes, you have to strap in. Yes, you have to put your safety gear on. And yes, you have to put on your helmet. You know, that helmet can absorb a hit, and the hit has been learned over a period of time. When you flip, if you flip, you're going to hit your head. If you hit your head without a helmet, there's no coming back to that. So I would much rather have them learn that in a controlled environment, and especially have somebody sitting next to them in a school setting, because then that ends up benefiting both the businesses because they've already had that training. And if they have it tracked that they already have that credential in it, you still would want to make, as if I'm the business owner, I'd still want to make sure and clarify that they had this skill and ability. I'd still run them through the training, but the training would be a lot less detailed than it would be as if you were starting from scratch.
Mhm.
And then, of course, over time, businesses know businesses better than I ever will. They know their own business. They'd be able to streamline that even more and build it into their onboarding process.
How willing?
Yeah, that's a good question when you say willing.
How willing are businesses in different parts of I call it our industry, because we're all basically in the same kind of industry. How willing are folks, businesses to get into the apprenticeship? We've had some apprenticeship programs started in the forest products industry specifically. They're there. I don't know all the ins and outs of them. Andy Fast, who's our industry analyst with Cooperative Extension down there. Andy's done work with some of those. He's got a bunch of credentials on the books.
Right.
But it doesn't seem to be a lot. We put out the apprenticeship program. Here it is. Everybody want to sign up for it. And there was a level of funding to help the businesses with that. The interest that we were all hoping for.
Right.
I think apprenticeships and internships are great. I think they're fabulous. And just how do we do more? Get more businesses and entities.
So when you're talking willingness within a business,
I'd love to answer that in a minute.
yeah, one of the things I had to do within economic development is you got to understand, and please, as business owners, if I point to you and say this, I think this is the case, please correct me if I'm wrong. But a lot of times when we come in and they start talking workforce issues, they need bodies, they need people, so they want direct hires right away. And the way that we do that is immediately through our job match system, working with our employment securities and our NH1 stops. But then the next, once we drain that pool, we got to start looking at going from direct hires to how do we create the pipeline. the first thing I start looking at with pipeline is the introduction into CTE in your local high school. Within that system, then you have a whole process of, okay, what is a business willing to do? If I am trying to keep my company moving forward, I'm not going to be opened up to a tour. I won't have time for it. I got some contracts I gotta fill, especially if I got a government contract. I gotta get that out on time. But I may be open to a tour, right before Christmas when I have to shut down for maintenance. I may be willing to do a work-based learning where somebody comes in. I might be willing to do a job shadow. I might be willing to do a pre-apprentice or an internship. And I think that needs to be facilitated by somebody. I think that needs to be facilitated by somebody within economic development that could sit down and have those questions kind of answered. But we have to also have a clear cut of, okay, when I say work-based learning, what does that mean? Because if I get there and I don't have that worked out, I'm wasting the business's time. They just want to know what to do and what they can do to help. And when they have it handed to them, this is what, are you willing to do this? And they know what you're asking them, it's a lot easier. And then from there, as you're creating that pipeline, then you start looking at how do we recruit the kids from the CTE programs? How do we get them from the Workforce Innovation Opportunity at Youth program? How do we get them from the Job Corps? How do we get them from all these different organizations that are out training youth? And then the even bigger thing for a business, once I get them in the door, how do I get them up to being a skilled worker so that they make me more money than they cost? And if I could get to the point where I'm making them more money than they cost me, now they're living in my community, they're buying homes, they're buying cars, they're taking vacations. And I think that's where you start to kick in with the apprenticeship programs at helping people get those credential steps forward to move forward within the company. But ultimately, if we go to the business and we can't answer that first question, how can I help you with direct hire? We're dead in the water because they don't see the benefit of working with us. So I think that's when we're talking about the willingness stage, we gotta at least put something on the table. And I think our job match system, when we have stuff that does it, but there's a pool that's limited. And if there's something that's clogging up that funnel, such as CTE doing a great job, then all of a sudden they stop and they can't do it. And we got to unclog that.
And I think to add to Jim's comments on employers, some employers are receptive to apprenticeship and others just don't know enough about it. And it's our job as Apprenticeship New Hampshire to help employers see that it's a tool in your toolbox. It's a way to build your employee pipeline. It's not everything. It's one thing to address the workforce development. Does it take some time? Yes, it does take some time. So those are some conditions that may prevent people not understanding what it is and not feeling like they have the time. So the Department of Labor has funded Apprenticeship New Hampshire to take away those barriers to some extent, to help educate the employers, figure out what they're, and I don't mean educate like they need to know their business. They know their business. They need to know how we can help them serve their business.
Right.
So, that's what we're doing. That's why we have these conversations so that we can, determine what the needs are, what the employers need. And then if Apprenticeship New Hampshire can help with that.
And we need to be able to step in and figure out where the barriers are that stops that child from really getting into a career path.
But I don't know,
They wanna
if
be able to
we
choose.
have in our community up here, like if I approach any business, they're 100% on board.
Okay.
But then we have that limitation when they have to. So I have students at Garland Mill, I have students that went to Declan's place, I have students that go to North Country Ford, but like Mike's been in the industry for how long?
In the industry?
Yeah.
When he was five.
Right?
More than 30. More than 30. And how many students have we successfully, like, you've had how many students from our high school?
Well, I don't know, a lot. I mean,
Yeah.
we're in this format, we're on our second one in 2 years,
Right.
but it's been more through the
Right,
years.
Right. But we have that limitation,
Right.
Yeah.
like you have Brody who's a certain age and
Right.
what are we gonna do with the next year? Like, he's not-
Yeah. Yeah, no.
But any business that I've approached, they're wide open to take apprenticeships or internships or the work-based learning. So it's amazing.
Yeah.
But, you know, then there's that limitations.
Yes.
I'd like to say, just back to Ray's question, one of the things, just for myself personally, I feel you have to be 100% open to the intake of these potential students / maybe employee, because you just can't complain unless you're willing to do that part. So I've been at the board table where dealers are just, everybody's just frustrated. There's nobody hired, nobody wants to work, and all this, you know, we've heard it a million times. And it's like, well, you better let a 14-year-old come in and spill some oil and wash the car poorly. Because if you're not willing to at least do that part, and so my answer, what I've sort of developed, and it's not robustly supported by everybody in my business either, but because I'm out doing this sort of thing, if somebody says, do you have space for, I say yes. And we try to figure out a way to do it, because again, it really is the first step to try and fix this workforce. At the end of the day, I just need technicians that can fix cars properly and efficiently and quickly. That's really my everyday concern.
Unless they're 16 or
Yeah.
35.
It's a
But-
reputation too,
Right.
right? So.
And I'll even take it a step further and say the whole process is not particularly clean, meaning a lot of these young people do not then move on to the industry. There's not a nice chain where they go from this to this to this to this. They hang out, they bother my help, and then they're gone and never seen them. In many cases, but we know that we're introducing them to something. We're trying to be kind to them. We're trying to be mentored, you know, whatever it is. And I really feel like as business owners, if you're not willing to take that first step and you're just going to sit at the bar complaining that nobody wants to work anymore, it's just a waste of time. You got to do something.
Even if it's getting into the CTE advisory board, you know, because, you know, God love education, but I tell you, there's nothing worse than having a bunch of educators decide what needs to be done in business. I would much rather have businesses sitting around the table deciding what's being done and then let it turn over to the experts on the education side, let them figure out how to teach it. And that's where the good mix I've seen come into play.
Do people here know what a program advisory committee is?
You should probably tell them.
So under federal Perkins regulations, each approved program has to have a program advisory committee that is made up of a majority of business partners, post-secondary, current students, past students, and a parent. And they're, under the law, supposed to meet a minimum of 2 times a year, best practices 4 times a year. And so they hear regular updates from the instructor. And then they are providing feedback. Hey, these are the skills we're noticing kids don't have in the curriculum next year. Really needs to focus on this. So I'm going to use criminal justice as an example. When we first opened the program, it was 100% corrections direct because they were having a hard time filling positions at the federal prison and state prison. Now it's more police officer driven because of the shortages within our communities. So the program advisory committee has the power to change the curriculum on a yearly basis. So the Department of Ed stripped out all of what they call the required competencies. And it's the program advisory committee that then determines what the local need is or the state need. And you can change the curriculum almost every year based off of that need. So, you know, looking at this table, we have either programs locally or at Littleton, our sister center, that folks could serve on and really help guide our instructors to make sure kids are, you know, getting the skills necessary so that when they come into apprenticeship or, you know, partnership with you, they're not bothered, you know, causing issues or they're not unsafe.
And I just wanted to add to Liz's thing though, for the apprenticeships to work in some of these businesses, they have to have an adult apprenticeship before we can even get to the pre-apprenticeship, correct? And so that's where I think from some of the businesses that I've gone out on Liz's behalf and we're talking to them, that is part of, it's too heavy of a lift for them because some of them don't have that capacity to do all of it, to get to that age group that they want to get to. So, and that's not their fault. That's just the way that's just
Right.
program's designed. So
Right, so we hope our team helps get them over that hump because we pretty much the heavy lift as far as creating the apprenticeship. Once we have an occupation identified, our team can actually put all of the standards together for the Department of Labor.
Yes.
Once that's in place, then that pre-apprenticeship can be built to connect back to the CTEs and start building that pipeline. But yeah, we can't do anything without an employer, a registered apprenticeship program, and an occupation. Once those are in place, then we can start all job seekers, recruiting all job seekers, but certainly connecting to the CTEs.
So I think that's two possible inlets that we could be looking at to help drive some of this change. I know within the apprenticeship program, we're already working with DOL, already doing that ahead of time. Within the CTE program, we have the advisory boards. There could be a question that's raised at every advisory board meeting, especially as it relates to the industries in that area. Is there an industry safety issue that is impacting hiring 14 to 18-year-olds? It's either a yes or no. And if it's a yes, then what is it? And document it. And unfortunately, that's what we got to do. We got to start documenting it to be able to say if it's an issue or it's not. I mean, I don't know if this is true or not, but somebody told me that kids under a certain age can't put toppings on a pizza, because if they put toppings on a pizza, the expectation is to put it in the oven. And if you put it in the oven, then that exceeds the expectation of being hurt. And I'm thinking to myself, how many kids are at home every single day putting stuff in the oven? You know, and how many kids have you known around a campfire that doesn't stick a stick in it, or, you know, run around or jump over it if you don't hold them back? We have to teach them how to do this. So some of these, I think, are going to be low-hanging fruits that we would be able to, with a reasonable expectation, to get them removed. And some we're going to have to go into that data collection to be able to show that it's not a hindrance. When we brought the START program into vocational rehabilitation, and we were talking about putting significantly disabled kids, significantly disabled, into hospitals, the insurance, we couldn't get anybody to cover the insurance. To this day, that program is still up and running, and there has not been a single file on any of those insurances. Why? Because the people who are training these kids make sure that they are being taught how to do things properly, and they're keeping them from harm by teaching them safe practices. And now many of these kids have gone from being in high school to being full adults, working a full-time job in a hospital. There's no reason why we can't do that all the way across the board.
So I'll just circle back one thing that you read on the willingness. Like, for us, we're willing to jump through hoops and do it because I believe in the program. It's how I got my job. I'm invested in it. But if you hand a logger this pack of information, so you got to fill all this out so that you can hire this person, they're going to give you some choice words and hire someone else. It needs to be a little bit of a simplified. I mean, I know there's going to be paperwork, there's going to be hoops to jump through. Be like, okay, let's get this kid involved in your business, and here's a boatload of work you got to do. And it's just, that's where I think you get a lot of the drop off. It's just not, you said, we're all in business to make money and keep moving forward and keep progressing. So you make me take 4 steps back. We don't have the time for it. We're on a schedule. So willingness is tied right to.
And if you do take that step back, you have to see the benefits of taking that step back. Because there is sometimes, especially in logging, if I'm out cutting trees and I don't take time to sharpen my saw every once in a while, I'm just rubbing dead wood together. And I know that if I take the time and sharpen that saw, I can cut down a hell of a lot more trees if I take my breaks. So it is doable, but you were going to say something. I want to hear what you have to say.
Well, a couple of things. I mean, I think what we're talking about here is capacity.
Yeah.
So businesses that can take advantage of this stuff are at a certain level of capacity. So, I mean, the only reason that Mike and I are here is that we have business managers like Crystal and Mike's people that are doing the paperwork that you're talking about, Declan, so that we can say yes to this stuff. It's fun being the yes man, right, Mike? I mean, we're good at that. You know? I said yes before you even open your mouth. You know, Mike and I have special handlers that keep us from saying yes. That's another conversation. But so capacity is one thing, and you know, I'm just reflecting on the conversation. I think Jimmy, you said at the beginning that let's start where we are and let's really make sure we understand what the real rules are, because a lot of it we don't have time to read all the regulations and the, you know, So that's one piece. And relating to that, I think about, we get a huge benefit. It's funny because we have a love-hate relationship with insurance companies and we have a love-hate relationship with government. And I think that, we are benefiting right now dramatically from the really good insurance companies that we have relationships with and the really good government programs that we have relationships with. So, and really, I think what we need is to, part of this solution is how do we stitch together our partners in insurance and government and education, and the programs that are really working for us. And I'll give you a couple of examples. We're part of a woodworkers cooperative, insurance cooperative, and they send somebody out every quarter to talk safety with us and to go through all the companies in our group. Cherry Pond Design was in there, White Mountain Lumber, Parrot, when Paris had a sawmill. Anybody that touches wood can be a part of this woodworkers cooperative, and and so it's the cooperative's interest to reduce safety liabilities.
Yeah.
And so they and it's so funny because when they call, I'm always like, oh my God, I don't have a half an hour to talk to this program off. Bill Kelly's nephew is our program guy, and he's great, and he's a safety nerd, and he comes in and and he just we learn a ton from them. So that's an example of an insurance company that we really like. Crystal just got a notification from another insurance company that said, hey, you have a 19-year-old that we got from you guys from the high school who went through the ELO program, and we kept him, and he's a good kid, and he's 19 years old, and he's not insured to drive our vehicles. Well, guess what? That doesn't work for us, And so we need to talk to that insurance company and figure out how do we make it work for them. And this is a good kid, and he drives his car every day to the job site. Why can't he drive his car or one of our vehicles to pick up materials and stuff? So that's good cop, bad cop. As far as government goes, we have a second injury fund. I don't know if you guys are all part of that, but that's huge. That's a really important thing. We've had one example where we've needed to use it. And right now, Crystal's working with the FMLA folks to get our family leave. The state of New Hampshire is now providing up to 60% for 12 weeks. It's going to cost us, we have 12 employees, and it's going to cost us $2,000, $2,200 something a year, so that if we have an employee who has an FMLA issue, they can have 12 weeks off at 60% of their salary, and we can augment that if we need to. And like Mike, I've been at it for over 30 years, and which is segueing into my next point, and I'm giving you some run for your money, Jimmy, on the oxygen in the room, so bear with me, but I'll give you the oxygen back in a minute. But over the last 30 years, we've probably had 15 instances where we needed FMLA. We didn't have it, so we had to fund it. In terms of parents dying, kids being born. We've even had an employee got cancer and died, and he was on the payroll for an entire over a year. We're paying his salary. Just stuff like that. It adds up. So we're so excited about this stupid little thing that the government's doing for us, but man, that thing is huge. The quality of life improvement that gives to all of us is enormous. So, I think we need to take these programs like FMLA and like, and the apprenticeship stuff. We're really excited about that. It's something that keeps coming up because we need to create the pipeline. We have 3 lead carpenters and 3 crews. Well, we need a 4th lead carpenter so that he can or she can spell one of the 3 when they have an FMLA. We've got our 3 leads are young guys. They're 30 to 35-year-old guys, and they're talking about having kids. Well, awesome. So we got FMLA, but what do we do when that guy goes out for 12 weeks? Well, we need a 4th lead. And how do we create that lead? Well, we have to hire him 3 or 4 years in advance just to train him. Even if he's a great carpenter, being a lead carpenter is a whole nother animal. So I think that, what Mike's talking about is having the patience to know, you're hiring these kids. 90% of them, you're never gonna see them again, and they're gonna be a pain in the ass. But that 10% is worth $1 million, quite literally, in some
Mhm.
cases. So I think coming together with these, trying to cobble together the programs that are really effective, and how do we get them to dovetail in a way that is, that we can leverage to really go somewhere, I think is what we got to do. And yeah, we need to nip and tuck around here. I think I keep coming back to Mike, but both of our businesses have been built on child labor. That's why I was that's why we're sticking to 30. That's why I said like give it 7 years, My father used to say, "Well, you don't need to talk to your mother about what we did today." But and that's a great story, right? But the reality is that a lot, Declan doesn't have the advantage of being able to put his children or the children of his employees to work because it's not a family-owned business, and more companies are not family-owned businesses anymore. Right. So we all of a sudden that pipeline of kids of owners has dried up, and even our kids today, we don't get the exemptions that used to be. So from a macro level, this becomes that much more important. And the last thing I'll say is that manufacturing isn't what it was in the 70s and 60s, and we recognize as a country that we need to reinvigorate manufacturing in the United States, and we don't have that capacity. Is all gone. It's amazing how quickly it dries up, right? When the mills closed and everything went to China, all of a sudden expertise is just like is wiped out. So we're kind of building it from ground up, and we don't have family businesses to fill that void anymore. So it makes it that much more important for us to figure out how to do it in today's.
And I think it's also important, something you said too. I think people underestimate the value that a young worker can take from even just spending any time at a business. Even if I choose not to stay there, I have a better understanding about that business, and I may take a work-life issue with me. And that's the kind of issues that we're talking about. If we can develop some of these training or address some of these issues successfully, it's just not going to make them safer on the job. They're going to take it everywhere.
Yeah.
If we can do something about the kid and the driver, it's just going to make him a better driver. He's driving already.
Yeah.
These are the kinds of things that we need to be able to supplement. I totally agree. We have to be able to bring back a lot of stuff back to where we're doing it with our hands and physically making things again.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I think we kind of jumped on the maybe overboard with trying to make things too safe. They don't want people to put things in ovens. They don't want people to climb ladders. Well, that's part of the world. And if it can happen during a time of war when we have to transition into it, then let's do it safely now. So I agree with you. Everything you just said.
Mark, is there anything that you want to share kind of in the manufacturing side? Since Ben brought that up?
I think to speak to what they've both said is I don't think there's a single person at this table that would spend the money to educate and to bring the kids up to speed, even just keeping 10% of them, if there was a clean pathway, and there just isn't right now. It's just a matter of making sure that if we're going to educate that individual, we're going to be able to put him to work, be able to give him the whole experience of the job, not just these.
Because right now you've got how many students with you guys, but they're limited as to where they can go, right?
Yeah, so we have no students at this time. And as far as I'm concerned, we really can't safely have students in our facility. So unless those regulations are lifted and we can educate them with hands-on experience on how to stay safe, right? It's a non-starter.
Yeah.
And I think it comes down, like, another key issue is the perceptions and stereotypes that some of the, these children's parents have, these legislators have about what the industry is about. right? Cause they heard the horror stories of broken paperboard or, you know,
Right.
something
Got
out.
pulled into the
Midwest,
machine
whatever.
and.
Cause I still see it to this day where you have this kid wicked jazzed up, you know, about a program, and you reach out to the parents and they say, no, my kid isn't going with those kids. Cause that's what used to happen, you know, CTE used to be vocational ed, it became a dumping ground for kids that didn't fit the mold of academia, you know.
And how excited were we all to have, you know, a student transition into a full-time position with us and stay for them.
Yeah. Like Littleton has the state-of-the-art manufacturing program. They have, you know, machines for $750,000, and they can't get kids into them because, you know, Littleton has their industrial park that donated all this equipment, but they can't get kids in there because parents say there is no money, there is no future in manufacturing, and it's a perception issue that we have to change.
Can I just want to say something too. To just sort of go off the what the apprentice or the intern or the student will get out of all of this, the business will also get a lot out of this too. At least what we've experienced at the Weather Vane is bringing in younger people. They often have like new ideas and like, you know, really innovative way to do things that, you know, me who's been in the business for 25 years and is like cynical and dry about it sometimes doesn't think about it because like, you know, I'm like, you know, mad about my job. And then these young kids come in and they do all this really cool stuff. And I'm like, wow, that's actually really smart. And we should do this instead. And it like kind of rejuvenates our older staff often when we have younger people that come in and like show us all these things. And so I think, you know, while the benefit is on paper for the person who is the apprentice or the intern or whatever, it actually is benefiting the company as well. So I think it is really important to like take the time to do all those things. And it is important to invest in that on the other side of the table as well.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I think it's a huge marketing thing too. You know, we kidding about only keeping 1 out of 10 kids, but those other 9 kids are going out into the community and talking about, hey, you know, Garland Mill is really cool. It wasn't for me, didn't work out, but you know, man, they treated me really well. And you know, that's a huge, you can't pay for that. You can't buy that with money. And you know, and I'm sure that's, you know, the same.
Well, 80% of New Hampshire's business that drives our state's economy are small businesses.
Yeah.
And I really don't ever see that changing.
No.
And it has, but if we don't have the next generation coming up behind us that has those skills and abilities, or if we hamstring them to the point, I mean, what tears me up sometimes is I'll have a kid that wants to do something that's maybe related into the trades or something that they could learn in their community. They don't get the opportunity to do it, but then all of a sudden they're faced with the chance, okay, I'm 18, now what? And somebody's saying, here's $100,000, go to school. Okay, go to school for what? Well, I'll just go to school. And on the other end of that, I'm working with businesses who say, I've got this kid who's overeducated and they don't know anything and I can't do anything with them. So it's kind of like, and it's not that they're not smart. As a recruiter, I was a recruiter for the Coast Guard where I got 100% of my people were from colleges. I just went to colleges and I waited for the first year for people to start dropping out. They drop out every semester. You probably have about 30% that stay. And I had students that really did well in our environment because it would teach them things. It would put things in their hands and let them do it, which is why I'm such a fan with the apprenticeship program and CTE and things that actually gets people's hands dirty. I remember the first manufacturing, going to Granite State Manufacturing, twisting their arm into doing one apprenticeship. Now they got 4. They got 4. That's a tiered system. A kid can come in there and start by making like $18 an hour and work his way all the way up to $50-$60 an hour. And that's a generational kid that you're talking about that lives in the community. But getting back to what we have to identify, and I think we started as a potential at the advisory committees, looking at the industries you're already working with. What are those safety issues that are stopping our 14 to 18-year-olds from moving forward? And the same thing with the apprenticeships. And that's a place, I think, where the low-hanging fruit where we can start And then we can start identifying by working with the various businesses through the economic development to start to continue to hear, okay, here's some other things that are getting in the way. And then we can use our, Jeannie Forrester just got hired by our agency. She has the understanding of how the whole political thing works. I don't do so well when I testify, so they don't let me. But I'm sure that she can word it in a way that it'll work, but we got to bring these partners to the table without them being threatened by it to show that here's all we're trying to do. We're just trying to keep our industry alive and move forward with that.
So I have a question, Jeremy, regarding who our audience is. Like,
Yeah.
when you say we're going to change their minds, are we talking about the legislature?
I think so,
first?
because
Yeah.
most of the things that I'm hearing, I mean, New Hampshire's famous for taking a federal law and making it more stringent. So we have to first start looking at our local legislators and say, okay, have we developed equipment? Have we developed processes and procedures that we no longer have that issue? So I think that we have to be able to hear that from businesses so that when we go out and we see it, and I can take pictures of it and we can take them on tours and say, look, I know it's scary, but stick your hand in there, we can have a little fake hand. Look, and
Like,
I mean, at some point you trust the equipment. Trust me, I've gone over in heavy seas and I trust the equipment. If you don't put your trust in the equipment, you don't want to use it. And the first time it fails you, unfortunately, it's too late and nobody else wants to do it. Okay, Bobby, you're next. No, I'm not going up there. And that's the way it works. But I think we're looking at bringing DOL, state DOL and federal DOL at one point. But I think if we have the data to be able to show them and how it's impacting business, I really think that reasonable expectation that people start to hear, I think when the general public learns that a 16-year-old can't climb a ladder because it's too dangerous. Well, what part of that is so dangerous that we can't teach them to do that or to use a power tool? Well, what's the power tool? And do you realize that everything that we have now is power tool? I mean, they got batteries for everything.
Right.
I mean, I had a kid out the other day using one of those snow shovels with a battery pack on it. I'm like, what the heck is that? That looks pretty cool. My back could use that. And these are all reasonable expectations that a kid could do. Clearing off a car. How do you clear off a car? How do you get something from the top shelf? How do you chop something? These are all things I think the normal everyday person would find reasonable. And I think if we present that to our legislators in that way, they would have a lot of trouble unless they were just outright defiant.
A lot of things today have got one. You guys directly manufacture, correct me if I'm wrong. But a lot of things now, the kids from 14 to 18, they'll come in and run it and not necessarily need a lot of extra training to run it. And they will help us how to run this thing because now it's so advanced. Basically computerized and
Right.
whatever else that I can't run it.
Right. They know where the
Program
panel
that
is
it's got,
or
right?
the,
So
yeah,
we learn from them as much as
Yeah.
we.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that, I think that's, and in the logging industry. And the days when I started, I've been in the industry for over 40 years. And I've done it all, from logging to sawmills to paper mills to foresters.
So you used to be a lot faster.
I used to be, but you're right. When you get the good old days of going out and buying, spending $200 on a chainsaw and going to work and now you get a career. No, you don't do that. Find somebody that's going to lend you $2 million and go out and buy some equipment. Now you got application. But the equipment is such. I don't know that even today, as much as I've learned with the computers and et cetera, I don't know that I can run it. Kids in school.
Right.
And I've
Yeah.
worked with some of them that will come out of the classroom at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, be on the job at 2:30, hop in the piece of equipment and go. And they're more efficient than the guy that's been doing the same job for 30 years.
Right. And that's where it
Right,
boils
yeah.
down to actually being able to make money for the business. It's being able to take that $1 million piece of equipment and operate it so it's making you $1.5 million. You know, you have to be able to leverage your equipment so it works for you. And you had something you were gonna
Yeah,
add.
Yeah.
just a question that I think is worth articulating and at least holding it in the back of our head. When I think about some of these Department of Labor rules that maybe seem a little foolish today, and let's just take the climbing the ladder one. I think we have to be aware that maybe some of these rules were brought about under the guise of safety, but what they were really doing was boxing out a segment of the workforce to protect another segment of the workforce. And going back to Ryan's example, the 17-year-old that has skills that can't use the tools is protecting the position of the 25-year-old. And so, as I say, if you look at any of them, they'll say, no, the basis of these rules is safety, safety, safety. Well, conveniently, you can't have a 16-year-old working in the paper mill while we're on strike. So that takes care of that problem as well. And I think if we flipped a lot of stones, you might say, yep, it
Right.
could be safety, but also isn't that wicked handy that we can't have 17-year-olds and and maybe when there was more of a pool for the workforce 25 years ago, it didn't matter because it is what it is. But as we scramble today, goodness, let's not box ourselves out for some really superficial safety rule. If really what we're doing is putting up a speed bump to protect the guy that's, doesn't want to lose his job or.
Well, I didn't think of that, but if you think about some of the push behind the $15 an hour, so it would be a living wage. Well, a lot of those living wages were entry-level jobs that, I've dated myself here that got paid like $1.75 an hour. And no adult would ever take that job, but I needed it in order to buy my wrestling shoes and my now laters, which I don't even know if they still have those. Those were important to me, and that was a way for me to do it. I've even heard that a kid could be a lifeguard at a pool, but they can't be a lifeguard because of certain ages at a pond. It just,
Yeah.
and it's crazy.
Yeah.
So I think you're right. I think it is about segmenting certain age group out of the population so that the working families can continue to take care of themselves. And if that's the case, what a shame that we allowed our society to get to that point, that we have to stymie the growth of our young in order so that we can take care of ourselves.
Right.
And I think it almost seems also those numbers have changed as well. Like we're aging out. That segment maybe was protecting their, like that protection was for the 25 to 30-year-olds, but now they might be ready to get out of the industry or, they've earned their retirement, but they're still the ones that are, don't have the option to exit.
Biggest generation, we're all getting out.
Yeah.
Got a great example. I've got a master machinist as our head of maintenance, and he has a wealth of knowledge to share. Could put a student in with him.
Right.
And
Yeah,
look at that
but you can't.
institutional knowledge being lost.
Right.
Exactly.
Exactly.
And how much
Yeah.
would it gain us as a company and that individual student
Mhm.
and
I mean, could you imagine? I'm sorry that's Michelangelo, but you can't go up into Stafflin and learn from him. But
Right. Yeah.
one of the world's greatest painters, but no, you got to do it from down here. Well, he's got tarps and everything. I can't see it. Well,
Yeah.
you can study it after it's down. It means a lot to know how that stroke is made.
Yeah. And to see it happening.
And the
Too,
safety
to
guards they
actually
put in
see it and
place,
see it
yeah.
on the machine that they're doing it on, or in the location that you're actually working out in the field where you're actually running the equipment.
And I think most of the operators today, again, correct me if I'm wrong, most of the folks in these positions today are willing to
Pass it on.
mentor
Yeah.
a young person because they know, most of us know that, okay, we're not gonna be in this for the next 10, 15, 20 years.
I think doing things like this and the messaging and getting the word out and getting folks to hype up and say, yeah, I would do it. And this is why I can't do it, or we don't do it, or, it was too difficult. Like, I think definitely there are some things here to look at with the capacity building and, is there a way to, expand the program? So there is someone also available to help the business owners more. I mean, you can only do as much as you can do, but if you can prove, like prove the cause and the need for expanding those things. This has been good. We're gonna make you come back, I think.
I mean,
Right?
one of the things that Chief always wants to know is, yeah, this is great, love meeting you, but if we don't accomplish anything, then we wasted our time.
Yeah,
So my question is, what is our next steps
Right.
and what do we want to do?
Yeah.
My thing is, my next step is I'm still looking to put together a report that I can put in front of my boss in workforce and say, here are the issues that I saw.
yeah. And I made this slide just kind of like going over, okay, this is what I hope we kind of get to, and we actually got to more or less. The right to waive, I was kind of like, I didn't know the right language, but it seems like that's kind of this stackable credentials where the employers can somehow influence that ability to and the programs to have that stackable credential. I said right to waive. Kind of made up my own language on it. But
Can I ask a question? Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
Oh.
Sorry, is it someone else? Me?
no, you go ahead, Ryan.
I am curious just by listening to all of these things about not being able to mentor a student or whatever, if anybody else is restricted by the labor hours that these students are allowed to work.
Yeah,
Because
I
we
put those
run
in here
into that a
too.
lot. Yeah, we run into that a lot at the Weather Vane because so much of theater happens in the evening, obviously, because shows are in the evening often or whatever. And I'm just gonna keep using Milo. He was our little carpenter this last summer, who is returning, and we will be turning 18 in the middle of the season, which we're all like gonna have a party about because then he can actually work. But he couldn't work past, I think it was 7 o'clock. Is the I think it's 7 is the
Yeah,
hours.
and the regulation I found, yeah, it was 7 o'clock. I think 2 days in a row. There's a few different ones, but I found one that's either before 6 a.m. or after 7 p.m. 2
Yeah.
days in a row. Then the rest of their hours for the week have to be curtailed and shortened.
Yeah.
So,
And so
that,
we
yeah.
lost a lot of really valuable time with him when we do what we call changeover, when we like change over the entire set because we change it over every night, but he couldn't participate in that. And so we would move them to the mornings if we could, but we often do them at night after the show comes down. We changed the whole set over. And, for a carpenter or somebody going into this business to be a carpenter, like a theatrical carpenter, learning how to put a set in or put it together on a stage is like a huge part of it. And,
Right.
that was one that really blew my mind. That was like 7 o'clock. Like what 14-year-old, 17-year-old kid isn't awake past 7 o'clock or like 7 o'clock?
Yeah.
That's really the
Games
restriction.
until midnight.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Here it is. This one here is
Yeah.
what we're talking about. Yeah.
So I was just curious 'cause, of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we do see it. So yeah, Mountain View Grand brought it up. Omni did. Actually, my husband's work did too. And I would imagine you guys might get it if you're doing work in the summer and you travel and you're leaving before 6 a.m. to get to the job site.
Sure.
And if you're paying your employees for travel, that comes up too. And probably in logging as well. You got to get out there and make the most of your daylight. And so, yeah, that is definitely antiquated, like wording in it almost. It's
Well,
almost, you could see where maybe at one point they were trying to limit the
Well,
hours,
thinking
but
growing up, I had mostly farms where I was. You'd have told a farmer you can't put your kid in the
Right.
field from dusk to dawn.
yeah. All
They had
that.
probably shot you on sight.
Yeah.
Come on, because that's their livelihood. And you're right. I mean, I think that there are some industry specific situations where you have to be able to work past those hours.
It just
I mean-
seems weird to me because like they have basketball games past 7 or football games or
Right.
everything else
Yeah.
goes past 7.
Good
Like
point.
why is this? Yeah, it was really bizarre.
Think about the training. They just did a big news article on this recently. They're talking about kids being injured with all this excessive training going from one sport to the other.
Mhm.
And by the time they hit 14, they drop out. No.
Yeah.
If there's any feds listening right now, I'm not saying we want our kids to stop training
Right.
for sports, but it's the same thing. You know, it's
Mhm.
like the concert pianist that's growing up as a 6 or 7 year old, and they start playing and playing and playing. They're playing the same number of hours. Some of us, if our brains can't shut off at night, we read, we do something, we physically do something, go out, shoot basketball, we go snowshoeing. There's a lot of different things that we can do. And we want to be able to, I think that, guess I'm rambling, but I'm just trying to, so many different things are coming into my head about that after 7 o'clock.
Yeah,
And I guess,
Yeah.
I remember playing football games, wrestling tournaments. They
yeah,
waited until after 7 o'clock so adults could get there to watch
right, to
it.
How
get
about
there.
hockey? We started at
Yeah,
5 in the morning.
yeah.
Yeah,
And,
Yeah.
if the sun comes up, you're hosed. But if it's at night, you can
Yeah.
play because the temperatures drop.
Yeah. Wow.
And then we fundraise to put lights up.
right.
I think it's crazy because in a cyberbullying world, most of our incidents happen 10, 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah,
So why not friggin' have them work?
right. Give them something to do.
Even engage.
Yeah,
But, on the solution wise, so the New Hampshire CTE Directors Association pays someone to kind of be our legislative watch. The New Hampshire Superintendent's Association pays someone to be a legislative watch. And then they fire sale us, whenever a bill is introduced relative to education or CTE. I don't know if there's an entity out there that when a bill's being introduced around labor, or a bill is being introduced, or, being reworked regarding labor, if there's an entity out there that can alert people about it, so that I can reach out to the auto industry and say, hey, let's get your pack together and get a testimony, because it's wicked easy to testify now in written communication. So when I get my alerts, there's a link right there. I can write a written testimony to that bill. And it's not that hard. But if we can bombard people, through the different packs, I'll leverage my teachers, say, hey, can you draft a statement for your pack, get approval to send it, and then we can submit it as, the White Mountains Regional High School CTE Center, automotive pack committee. Here's our testimony on this labor law. So I don't know if there's an entity that does that.
There is, and so, and what we just became members this year, and any of you can actually become members too, is BIA, Business and Industry Affairs. So they are watchdogs when it comes to legislation, and I've just joined the Economic Development Committee, which would look at labor. So this is definitely something that I can be more engaged in, and again, if you guys have any interest in becoming members, I can introduce you. But this is on my list now as well, so.
And just so I say it, Business and Economic Affairs is purely Switzerland in this. We don't care what anything happens on either side of the fence. We just want it to work.
Yeah.
We want it to work for everybody that's involved, and we don't want to take a position. We don't want to take a side. We just want to take what's out there and make it work to the economics advantage. It gets real difficult when people start drawing lines in the sand, and I'm on this party or that party. Don't care. I have a business. I have a student. They want to learn. It's a skill set. They want to get from point A to point B. I want to get them there. I don't really care how we go about getting that there.
I was just gonna make the point, I'm not sure if it's relevant or not, but I do believe that one of the things Jimmy had mentioned, I do believe one of the things that is working against us in this is the fact that we don't have the farm kid anymore. So when I grew up, I was not a farm kid, but I had friends that were. And some of these regulations and rules, if they were in place 30 years ago, would look silly by comparison to what those kids were doing.
Right.
And what they were expected to do, whether
Right.
it was driving, operating hours. Farm kids grew up on farm and they often were a resourceful bunch of hardworking. And as I say, and I don't care what you told the father, this is what you're gonna do. And we've lost that mental picture because we don't have the farm kid anymore.
Right.
And I'm not saying whether that's right or wrong, it doesn't matter. But the point is, it's made it easy to, well, yeah, but nobody works that late or gets up that early or drives that or,
Well, guess what they do?
They do, and it's interesting because like looking at all of this, if you're working on a farm, these don't apply.
Right.
So at some point, that made the difference. At some point, they were like, no, we need this. So they at least applied it to farm labor. Because if you look through these, kids can, if they're working on their family farm. So, I mean, yeah,
So we just
it's
don't have-
amazing that changing, so we don't
still
have as
we
many
have the
over.
tractor 'cause We just don't have the
Yeah.
family farm. I mean, there
Right,
obviously there's
right.
a few examples, but you know, it was way more. Some
Yeah.
time ago, it was way more, and we all knew that family. We all knew that guy. That kid could drive anything at 19. Could
Yeah.
live in everything.
Well, look at the hours when you look at culinary. Some of the best bakers, when do they get up?
Right.
I mean, if I don't
Yeah.
have stuff ready to,
Matt is in there at 3
We have some
a.m.
that work overnight.
if you
Yeah.
don't have things ready to go by 6 a.m., you've just missed half your market.
Right.
Because, mostly muffins. Somebody wanted me to drive up there this morning. I'm like, seriously? I have to get up at 5.
What time do you think they were making muffins?
They want to get very late, and then that's the
Yeah.
point. I mean, and that's the beauty of our economy and beauty of our neighborhoods. Somebody is up 24/7. And if you don't believe me, ask your police force, ask your hospitals, ask your farmers, ask your educators. Sometimes the best time to grade paperwork is when nobody's around and it's quiet. I mean, we take the time to do it. I mean, this morning, I literally got up at 5 o'clock and I couldn't get that reasonable expectation out of my head. I had to write it down. I only had my phone next to me, so I just texted it. So unfortunately, I texted it to everybody at work. So at 5:30, they get it.
You were like, oh
You
no.
gotta capture it when you capture it. And I know that there are a lot of different jobs that people do that stuff. I mean, if you've got a product that you have to get out for a client, and that's your main client, you're not going to stop working on it. You're going to put everybody that you can on it. And I'm telling you, from a kid standpoint, to miss out on the opportunity to create something that's really needed in the field, you can't get that back. And to go home, you feel bad. It's like any search and rescue case that we did in the Coast Guard. You did not want to be left out. Nobody wanted to be left out when people needed you. And to be told to go home because you just did a 12-hour shift didn't matter. Didn't matter.
Yep.
It goes back to my first statement. Schools get away with it. You know what?
Yeah.
Why can't other people?
Yeah.
If I've got kids leaving their house at 5:15, either Woodstock, New Hampshire, or up by the Columbia town line, to get to a bus, to get to our center. Then they get back to their school. They get on a bus and go down to Litchfield to play basketball and get home at 10:30.
Yeah.
So,
I didn't hear.
we're legally able.
Different
to
equipment and
Well, I mean, getting back to what are we gonna do tomorrow? I really, maybe, I don't know who's talking about the stackable credentials, but I mean, if we can, and I don't know if we want to we probably aren't, it's maybe not the right time to talk strategy, but I mean, stackable credentials would be great for us. We'd love to have that. And if we could do that and have a waiver, after we've completed that work, man, that works great for us. And I think, I don't know much about politics, but it appears that the legislature in New Hampshire and the federal legislature is really struggling to get anything done. And so, I think it's unreasonable for us to expect them to change the law. But if we can get the civil servants, to change the, without changing the law, they can leave the law in place as long as they give us this waiver or something like that. That seems like a great strategy, but I don't know how that, I mean, it sounds like everybody here is kind of on board with something like that. I don't know who you talk to, Jimmy, your political people.
And see, I don't either,
or the
but
industry
I'm gonna
group,
find
or-
them. I mean, that's the whole, because once you have a good idea, you'll have people want to rally around it to get behind it.
Yeah.
Industry's gonna have to be able to point it out, what the issues are and how they're impacting. And we need to be able to have that argument saying, hey, look, if you look at a student when they get up in the morning, here's when they get up, here's when they go to bed after playing a football game or marching in a band. All these different arguments need to be able to come together. But if we don't have the initial, here's what's stopping us from engaging in practical handoff knowledge, skills, and abilities transfers to those 14 to 18-year-olds. We'll have to find our champions. That's going to be the big thing. We got to find our champions. Just like the two business owners here, if you're a business champion, you're a business champion. So what made you champion? So we got to find people in those steps to make them the champions. And I think CTE is going to play a major part in this. And how we kind of, it's not that you're more competent, it's that you're doing it and the safeguards are in place. So how do we take those same safeguards and make people feel comfortable that they're being done at this industry? Same thing with apprenticeship. We look at what we've done with apprenticeship. We had 3 people in the state, and now we have every section of the state that's being impacted. And most businesses don't know I can take any job in your business and create an apprenticeship around it. It used to be just plumbers, electricians. I remember in 2005, we looked at how many apprenticeships they were doing in the state. There was 8.
Now we have over 100. But to
Nice.
speak to
Yeah.
the stackable credentials, so when building an apprenticeship program and we identify an occupation, we then go out to the industry and we identify the credentials that are related with that occupation, and we help the employer embed those within their on-the-job training. So that's certainly part of apprenticeship, because we are wanting people to leave with credentials, portable credentials. So that's something that we can help you build, through an apprenticeship program.
So if there is a waiver because of a training that's done, we can now identify the training and why the waiver was done, tell other businesses that this is a way
Right.
forward.
And I think it's important to, from a messaging standpoint, but also just, to articulate, we don't want to get out of anything.
No,
Like, we're trying to, you were talking about your master machinist, and man, I mean, what an opportunity, what you said, what an opportunity, and it's the same, I think, in all of our businesses, is that these kids are, we want our kids to work, and so we want to, sure, it's important to say, like, obviously kids can stay up late and obviously kids are more talented than us old folks, but make that point. But the other point is that we really want to start developing kids early, because they're just sitting around doing stuff, but
And not because.
They're on the computer.
They're on the
Right.
they're on the computer, right?
And
They're
not
on their
because
phone.
Which is
not
what
because it's
everybody
bad for labor
says.
either.
No,
But
it's
because
because
an
it's what's good for
opportunity.
it's the best thing for the kid, and it's so anyway, I just think that messaging is important, but I think we all recognize that it's not because we're making a buck, it's because long term it's best for our community, state, country. I mean, you're just talking
And
about
for the students.
and
Because with
absolutely.
COVID, they all lost that whole, having a set schedule and learning how to work things in. Like their schoolwork, or whether it be going to work and things of that nature. Once COVID came, that all went away. And now kids are having a hard time figuring out, well, when do I have time to do this? And when do I have time to do that? But the ones that learn sooner seem to be progressing faster
Yeah.
and are more reliable.
Yeah.
So as I see is sort of next step, so we definitely feel like we're walking away, that we're doing something, is.
no, we're going to do something.
No, I know, yeah, no, we are doing.
Yes,
I'm
we are.
trying to set
All right.
I'm trying to mentally set deliverables,
So
so.
that's that.
I see
key point.
there's two different paths going at the same time. So if you haven't submitted to us sort of the issues that you're seeing at your workplace, things that are hindrances, so we can build that list for Jimmy, we definitely need you guys to get that to us, and we'll continue to reach out to other businesses too. And then we'll also work with Rob and Michelle and Liz and then you all, obviously, with this stackable portable credentials, so that we can kind of build, whether it's a waiver, whether it's legislative, whether it's DOL, like we're just kind of building what we want it, where it should be, and what we should see. And we'll take advantage of, implementing that with our advisory, the CT Advisory Council. And we're happy to be more present at those things as well, to help grab that, so that we can create this report that you can take to the committee commissioner and others and our legislators so that we have something concrete. It goes beyond co-ops, but obviously
Yeah.
for us, the focus is co-ops.
And I can't speak on behalf of what anybody will ever do, but in my mind, what I'm seeing is with housed within business and economic affairs, we have our recruitment. We have statistics, housing, travel and tourism. And what I would say is our strongest feature is Department of Economic Development. Combine that with workforce, we have our economic development team that is connected with the CEDARs around the state,
Which I'm
as
one of the
well
leaders.
as that's one step in. And then we have on my side, the NH Works offices, which are 12 around the state. And we have a minimum of 2 business people in each area. Then the next step is we've already partnered with the apprenticeship program. We need to do, I think, a better job within the CTE of divvying up where I think there's 28 CTE centers. Is that correct?
Yeah, 28 counting the two in Vermont.
Okay. So 28 centers, and as a result of doing that, how do we get our NH Works and DED to help facilitate what's happening industry-wise with your help and industry leaders' help to be able to funnel all this information back into our legislative guru so that we can bring the right people to the table to start making steps forward with this while you're still doing what you do to run your own businesses and pass along generational information in a timely manner. I mean, if we lose some of this generational knowledge, we won't get it back. And if God forbid, if they turn around the big talk of the EMP bomb going off and everything electronic stopped working, we're going to have to go back to some of the old school ways on how we get things done. So understanding the basics, whether it's in sports or anything in business, is critical. So I think we could start somewhere.
And I will also, so the work that we're doing is thanks to our Northern Borders Regional Commission grant.
Apply for another.
And well, so Ron, when you brought that up today about the 3rd-year funding gap and that you sometimes get it from Perkins, sometimes you don't. I see an opportunity. We're applying for 250,000, us and my counterpart down in Cheshire County, as a partnership grant for a full 500,000. I see an opportunity to put this in as a line item to help cover so that we can make as part of workforce development, which I know your boss.
$44 million.
Yeah, the commissioner will support after my meeting with him yesterday that this will fit in perfectly with training and recruitment, a part of that. So we will have a follow-up conversation on what that could look like, because I have to get my letter of intent in March 15th.
Because here's the other thing is we've got to be able to show how this all directly connects and to get our money back for taxes. If we could get some of this money back and to help the workforce at the lower level, that feeds the apprenticeship program, which when we start continue to produce results, apprenticeship got the extra money because they proved that we can make it work here in the state. Once we start proving things can work, that's like putting money toward things that are working, because there's too many areas where they put it that doesn't. So they want to say, don't look over here, look over here, New Hampshire, it's working here. And that's what we want. And that'll give us the opportunity to get more of our own money back so that we can put back into our own citizens and keep them here. This is a great quality of life. I hate when I see kids tell me that they want to leave this state. They have no idea what they're telling themselves. And unfortunately, they go, and historically, they come back at the age of 40, realizing, oh man, I could have been doing so much better if I would have stayed here. But sometimes you have to learn things the hard way.
So I think that's kind of where this whole thing started. Was we all know we hear, kids these days, this new generation, and we all know there's some truth to that. We're not brought up to work like we used to be. So we can't afford to hold back the ambitious ones, the go-getters. They want it. They're ready. And we're just holding them back.
Every generation has said that.
Yeah.
Well, and there's certainly some truth. I mean, when we go to hire someone, I see they're 18, 19, 20, 21, 25 now. It's like, all right, like you said, Ben, you know, I spent a lot of time on the computer and maybe not as much time building something.
That should be our tagline. We can't afford to hold back the ambitious.
Absolutely.
I mean, that, the minute somebody says no, can we afford to hold back on the ambitious ones?
Yeah,
I mean, tell me about the generation, and
as
they'll
a
spit
young
it back
person who
out to
went
you.
through this
Yeah.
exact thing with
Yeah.
places I worked
I like
at, it is incredibly frustrating to want it and just the employer says, "Oh, I don't have the reason you can't, but we can." And then you're just in a holding pattern, right?
Yeah, because a
What
kid
am I
doesn't
doing?
think that. A kid thinks that they're being rejected by you,
Yeah.
not a rule.
It creates something, you know, where you see your buddy succeed and you draw right along with them.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
exactly, and that's true. That's 100.
Oh my, I can't tell you how many kids in my high school that it's almost like that movie Stand By Me, where the kid that's struggling in school and the friend stands up, says, you can do this, and makes him do it. Kids will pull each other out of the gutter, and not everybody has a home. And I've seen, I mean, I had 2 adopted mothers when I grew up, that women in the neighborhood. Well, my mom didn't know I ate there and down their houses too, but dog that I, adopted the dog. But these are all things that make a community. And once you start having that tight knit community, you're going to pull each other up. And as you get older as a young person, those people that helped you as they age, you reciprocate back to them as well. And that's what we want to preserve here. At least that's what I'm hearing.
So yeah, so if you haven't submitted to Maeve or myself, sort of what we talked about today that's specific to you, please do so we can start building that out. And if you know other, people that you've worked with and neighbors and everything else, let them know and ask them to send it to us too.
Yeah.
And what I'm
Doesn't-
thinking too,
Yeah, it could just
I'm-
be bullet points. kind
Yeah,
of
it doesn't
thing.
have to be something
Like
fancy.
nothing big. I'll put it together.
the more I'm thinking is there's strength in numbers.
Yep.
When we put this together, and I say let's put together this report, and then let me see if I can't get Joe and some of our team to actually make a presentation. Having it come from a Cedars partner, and then also looping in Bino with this, I think it will carry a little bit more
And
weight.
Steve, with the
And Steve.
MDRC's, the rural development.
Steve, yeah, because Steve introduced. So that's the 2 different prongs that I think that we could hit with.
Yep.
And to be able to show this kind of movement should increase your ability to
Right.
make you really competitive for that workforce grant.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, everybody. We
Yes.
really do appreciate your time today. I feel like, we came up with this, when Declan brought it to me and then I brought it to Maeve and then brought it to Jimmy and you all agreed to be here today. It just solidified that we're on the right track here. And, for those of you who have been with me so far, I felt through something.
So the good
Yeah.
news, Declan, you are the employee of the month for the month of January. The bad news is it's the 31st.
Right.
Well, he's your future owner, so,
Thank you.
So this is like a general.
Yes. Thank you, Ryan, for being with us.
Thank you so much, everybody. It was really
And I,
great to be here.
what you wrote and sent to me, and I'll give it to Jimmy as well.
Okay, I might, if it's all right, get a few more people from the weather bank to give me some more bullet points.
Yes, absolutely. As much as you can get. And
Okay.
even from, any other businesses in Coos, that would be great. Anybody, any other connections, that would be wonderful. Whatever we
Yeah,
can do.
definitely have some.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate being part of it.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Research. Colleges. There's some things we could talk about maybe.
Yeah, we're definitely interested.
Very timely because. Yes, so let me know what we can zoom in. I'm from the Seacoast, but we have a, his name is Chris from Clem. And so normally we
Yeah,
together and.
Well, I mean,
kind of see what your inputs are and I'll explain a little bit more about it.
And
Yep. Thank you. Thank you.
And then that's a whole nother fact.
And I have one question, the young man was, couldn't drive, Was he driving a commercial vehicle?
I mean, it's.
No, it's. Yeah, F-150.
We're not,
That's making me
you don't
crazy.
need a seat.
Yeah.
It's not a CDL license.
No.
Oh my God.
Driving the car, yeah, that makes me crazy. It's just me, like.
One guy.
I'm one for it, like-
Yeah.
We just found that out, yeah.
That's what happened. Yeah, I don't know, maybe we can help to
We don't have. the tools that we
alleviate some of these barriers with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's great. I mean, because we have carpenters who are not carpenters.
Did that work for you?
So, you know, what do we-
Yes, I think you did great. Did that work for you?
We never told
Yeah, I
them, we
wanted-
told them, apprentices, we don't even have a.
Had it as kind of like a little, bit of a
Trying
drive.
to figure out how
Yeah,
to.
it worked.
Cover the points that everybody is.
I read all this ahead of time,
Yeah.
and everybody was saying stuff all.
Exactly, yeah, that's what those were, is everybody that I had talked to, I kind of. That way I was sure to kind of bring up what everybody had.
And so if I
had
can
already.
get into Concord some conversations.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's companies that is helpful.
Areas where I can.
Something that you need to want to do it, but you don't want to do it just because you want to build your line. But there are things that are not.
Yeah.
I gotta take a picture of a lot.
And so Margaret, who wasn't in her here today, she did that on the Mount Washington Hotel in Front Porch. Be more than happy to host you for if you're there. Because they also cover just the gamut of everything from equipment to baking, they have everything. And there's some points in there that come up, like I said, she's got experience in the CPC side as well. So, she could really, you can get pictures of.
Okay.
Like she brought up like some big, get you take photos of the, on the ladder. You know, like as simple as that, so.
If they were closer up, they can jump on their bed.
Right.
Practice it.
Yeah, yeah. So,
With the shiny star
yeah.
that glows in the dark.
So.
When you combine.
Yeah.